Greetings and welcome to another episode of Math with Mrs. D in room 403. I'm here with you to start a new unit, Unit 5, which will be about fractions, decimals, and percents. And we're starting today with Lesson 5.1, which will be a fraction review. Please make sure you're in a distraction-free zone, that you're going to have no interruptions. You have a pencil and your note-taking packet. Remember, you can pause and watch more than once, and please take clear notes, but you don't need to copy everything. So let's get started. Some key vocabulary that you're going to be noticing used is the word whole, or one, or unit, all talking about what that whole group or whole thing is that's going to be split into fractional pieces. Fractions are written with a numerator on top and a denominator on bottom with that fraction bar in between. And a unit fraction is 1/8 of 8 or 1/4 of 24 or 1/6 of 12. So it is that numerator 1 and the denominator whatever fractional part we're dealing with. So let's start with a little warm-up. Let's take a look at number 1 here. An hour is what fraction of the day? Well, I do know that there are 24 hours in a day. So 1 hour would be 1 out of those 24 hours, so 1/24 of a day. A minute is what fraction of an hour? Well, I know there are 60 minutes in an hour, so 1 minute is 1/60th of an hour. A second is what fraction of a minute? Well, it's very similar, that I know there are 60 seconds in a minute, therefore there's 1 minute for 60 seconds, so 1/60th of a minute. I'm going to throw another one in here. If we have 3/4 of an hour, we might think of that as, well, I know that 1/4 of an hour equals 15 minutes, because I know my clock pretty well. And if 1/4 is 15 minutes, then I get 3 of those 15 minutes when I'm talking about 3/4. And so that would equal 45 minutes. So it's pretty significant to be able to see this type of a fraction. They're called unit fractions, and it's 1 out of the whole. And then you can use that to multiply to get your 2 out of the whole, or 3, or 4, 4 out of 8, whatever it is you're dealing with fractional units. So we're going to talk about some big ideas that we want to make sure we don't forget about with fractions. Fractions were invented to express numbers in between whole numbers. So we have a number line here, and this one looks like it starts at 1 and goes to 2. This little hash mark splits this area exactly in half. So that's the halfway mark, but because it has 1 already, we could read it as 1.5. Another big idea is that fractions can name parts of a whole object. So, assuming that these are equal, if we had 1, we would say we had 1 out of the total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we would read that as 1/6. If we had maybe even 1 down here, we would say, well, we have 4, and our whole goes down here out of the total amount, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 4/8. So we could say we have 4/8, or half of that whole unit, that whole rectangle, is given. So fractions can also name part of a collection of objects. So let's say I'm collecting hearts. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the one out here is 6. So I have 1 out of the 6th or 1/6 of my hearts are outside of the box. And finally, fractions are fractions of something. That something is considered the whole, and it matters what that whole is. It's considered the unit or the one. So let's take a look at the whole. If my fraction that I'm dealing with is 1/2, is 1/2 of a banana the same as 1/2 of a hippo? No, they're not. So you really, really need to know what you're working with first in order to get an idea of what that half represents. See, half is not really a quantity until you've got a whole that you are dealing with. So half of a banana is much smaller than half of a hippo. So half is not always equal. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some basics here. So fractions can be written either vertically or horizontally. I should say diagonally. I think they mean horizontally because it splits in there right next to each other. And the number below the 9, the number below the fraction bar is the denominator, and it tells us how many equal parts. So how many equal parts into which the whole is divided. And the top number is the numerator, and the numerator names the parts of the whole. I should say the parts of the whole being considered. So let's talk about the basics here with fractions where the numerator and the denominator are the same. So let's say if we have 8/8, we have to think of what that denominator means. It means that whatever you have, let's say I have a pizza, it is split into equal parts, and in this case it is split into 8 equal parts because that's what my denominator lays out. And the numerator says that I get 8 of those 8 parts, which is saying that I got every single one of those parts, and once I have every single one of those parts, I have one whole of that something, that pizza or that object or that collection. Okay, so a 4/4, you'd have 4 things that create that whole, or 4 equal parts, and you get all of them, you get that one whole all together. So another big idea is that fractions represent many things. Fractions can represent division. So if my fraction says 3/4, it's really taking the 3 and dividing it 4 ways, which seems like that would be sort of an impossible thing to do, but we have done our magnitude estimates and we know that that's going to be less than 1. So it's going to be in the decimal place. And you can think of it like money. If it were $3 divided by 4 people, then wouldn't it be true that each one of them would be needing to get or to cough up 75 cents each? So fractions can represent probability. And many of you play games where you are rolling a die, and there are 6 sides to the die, which the denominator tells us the total sides in this case, and you have a chance of rolling the number 1 out of 6 times, because there is only one side that is a 1. So the probability of flipping a coin would be, well, you have 2 options on the coin, right? Heads and tails. And what are your, what's the probability of getting a heads? Well, you only have 1 head on the coin, so you would have 1 out of those 2 possibilities. So a little trickier thing is that fractions can work to compare 2 quantities as a ratio. Let's say we have a classroom, and let's say there are far more girls than boys, and somebody wanted to describe that classroom, and they said, well, we counted up the kids, and guess what? Every time there was 1 boy, there were 2 girls. So we would say that it is a 1 to 2 ratio. Or let's see, in the case of our math class, we have, let's say we have 21 kids and 1 teacher. So the ratio would be 1 teacher to 21 kids. So that was a basic overview of some fractional ideas that we need to make sure we've got straight before working and thinking about fractions. Today we'll have some journal pages to work on, so look for the directions in class about that. I do have to say that on one of the pages, your directions will mention that you will be using counters. We're not going to use counters like objects to move around. We're actually just going to be using something like dots or X's or some other easy symbol to represent your fractional part. So I might say that I have total of 6, but maybe I will have 2 of those. So 2 out of my total of 6, so my fraction represented is 2/6. Well, I think that's enough of an overview for right now, and I think that we will say, have a great day. My little hippo is back. Happy as a hippo to be doing math. And I'll put that hippo in the river because they sure like to be in the river. Maybe instead of those really happy eyes, we'll actually open his eyes. So, math is awesome. Goodbye.